This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ Bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that still haunt us today. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, the stories were history and the people who lived it and the paranormal meet. Now, who doesn't love a good ghost story, right? Welcome back to Haunting History Podcast. I'm your host, Kat.
And I'm Haley.
This is a story that I've been thinking about doing for a very long time. It's been everywhere for years, and some say that the story I'm about to tell you is an inspiration for the Chucky movies, which I refuse to see.
I don't think I've ever seen a Chucky movie.
I've only seen the commercials. There's even a Chucky with his girlfriend, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like the first Chucky was probably kind of a long time ago, and there's been a recent-ish one, I think. But none of them. I don't care to see any of them.
We went to a Halloween festival this weekend. Did you see how many people were dressed as Chucky?
Yeah, because I think that there's a new one. I think that's why it's like become popular again. I'm gonna look it up.
I'm not gonna see it, so I don't really care. I have a problem with dolls and clowns anyways. More dolls than clowns. You're freaked out by clowns in general because we've discussed the whole It thing.
Yeah, I saw It when I was like 7, so I don't know if I was always afraid of clowns because I was young when I saw the movie. So as far as I'm concerned, I've been always afraid of clowns.
But what about dolls?
I don't think I've given it much thought, honestly.
You've watched Antique Roadshow with me though, when people have these dolls that were passed down from great grandma and they're creepy ass dolls worth like $70,000, and they're like, oh, I could never get rid of it. It was my grandma's doll, and I'm like, I would leave it in the parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think objectively some of them look creepy, but I don't know that I've ever they're not like clowns to me. So
like if you walked in a house that had a china case filled with dolls, you would be like, yeah, that's okay. I would turn around and walk out.
I would think it's weird, but not because I'm scared of the dolls, because I think it's weird that someone has a bunch of dolls.
I wonder if part of my reasoning for not wanting to do this story either is because there's 3 rules when you see this doll. It's Robert the doll. And when you see this doll, there's 3 rules. The first one is you have to introduce yourself. The second one is you have to ask permission to take photos. And when leaving his area, you have to say goodbye. So we'll at least introduce ourselves to Robert. We did. I'm Kat. This is Haley. We're going to tell your story. And we'll say goodbye at the end. But we're not obviously going to take pictures of him. But I mean, maybe it's so weird because you and I talked and we knew we were doing this story today. I have had nothing but issues all day with my computer, like everything. And then just a few minutes ago, we were in the garage and the garage randomly closed. So like we've had weird things happen ever since we said that we were going to do this episode. So just to be careful, all the respect, Robert, we're just going to tell your little story. So the 3 rules, when you go see him, he's actually located at the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. There are thousands, I think there's over 10,000 people that have written letters. There are thousands of people that will say you will regret not doing the 3 things. Robert is a one-of-a-kind doll handmade by the Steiff company of Germany around the turn of the century. Standing 40 inches tall and stuffed with wood wool known as Excelsior, he is dressed in a sailor suit, said to have been worn by his owner. The little boy gave him the sailor suit, or put the sailor suit on him.
So is he like a big doll? Like an American Girl life-size doll?
40 inches tall. Have you never seen Robert the doll?
No, but I also don't know what 40 inches tall is.
Okay. 3 feet is 36 inches.
Okay, so it's literally like life size of a child.
Yeah, it is.
That's creepy.
It was the same size as he was when he got it. But look up Robert the doll and take a look at it, because everybody listening who hasn't seen Robert the doll, he's in a display case. Still wearing the sailor suit, by the way. There he is. Isn't he attractive? At one point, he had painted features on his face. His unusual size indicates he may have been fashioned in the image of his constant companion, a boy named Robert Eugene Otto. Or as a window display, no one really knows for sure other than it was made by the Steiff Company. And if you don't know who the Steiff Company is, do you know who the Steiff Company is?
No, but I'm assuming it's like Mattel or whatever.
No, they're a very famous. They make teddy bears. Well, they're famous for their teddy bears, and they're very valuable. If you watch Antiques Roadshow, I keep bringing up Antiques Roadshow in this episode, but if you watch Antiques Roadshow and they come up with a Steiff bear, it's always going to be very valuable. They're old. They're stellar construction on these bears, and Robert the doll was made by that same company. Robert, the little boy who got the doll, named it Robert after his own first name, and then he went by Gene. His name was Robert Gene Otto. The doll's story begins in the early 1900s in Key West, Florida. There's multiple theories about the origins of Robert's powers. One popular story, and this is a hard part about a story like this, it's all legend. Like, no one knows for sure other than he was made by the Steiff Company. No one knows where he came from. No one knows. It's only stories passed down. So it's another reason why I kind of put this story off, because if you watch YouTube of any paranormal shows, or if you listen to any other paranormal podcasts, almost everyone's done a Robert the doll episode. So no one really knows the origins of his powers, if he has powers. A popular story is that the doll was cursed by a servant in the Otto household, a woman who practiced voodoo. Supposedly, the servant gave Robert to Gene as a form of revenge against the family, like cursed the doll and then gave it to the little boy. The Otto's family treatment of their staff was rumored to be harsh. It's said that the servant used her knowledge of dark magic to imbue Robert with dark spirits. It's not likely that's what happened. I don't know how she would come across a Steiff doll the same size he is. And there's a more likely thought of where Robert came from. And the voodoo curse, it does remain a theory, but it's speculative, and it has endured popular culture. It's a better story than what probably really happened. What's most likely is that Gene's grandfather bought the doll on a trip while he was in Germany, and a Steiff historian has said that the doll was most likely never intended to be sold as a toy. He was most likely part of a set fabricated for a window display. And the grandfather may have gone in there to buy his grandson a teddy bear and saw the doll, and the doll was his grandson's size, so he asked to buy the doll. That is the most likely and reasonable story, but that doesn't explain why the doll has such negative spirit attached to it. An angle that researchers have explored is that Gene himself might have been responsible for the doll's supernatural abilities. Gene's intense attachment to Robert may have transferred some form of psychic energy into the doll. This is a common belief among those who study haunted objects, that intense emotional bonds can infuse objects with energy, allowing them to act as conduits for paranormal activity. Now, here's the thing. If we can believe a house is haunted, and we can believe an antique is haunted, and we don't know what caused, like, not every single haunted house or haunted chest of blankets or whatever has had voodoo around it. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, the fact that it might be Gene's own personality that sort of got absorbed with the doll, then maybe that makes more sense. And it probably does make sense when we get towards the end of the story about how his personality was. But people say that Gene's own personality was said to have changed dramatically whenever he was around Robert. Family members recall Gene talking to the doll as if it were alive, and there are reports that the doll even seemed to control aspects of Gene's behavior, influencing his decisions and his moods. Gene had quickly become attached to the doll. He would carry it everywhere. Initially, his behavior was considered normal for a child with a beloved toy. However, things began to take a darker turn as Gene's parents and other household staff started to hear strange noises coming from Gene's room. They would hear Gene having conversations where his voice would change as if he was responding to another person. Gene also began to blame Robert for any misbehaviors or accidents, insisting that Robert did it. Objects would be found overturned, broken, or misplaced. Gene would always attribute these incidents to Robert. The family and servants reported hearing giggling, seeing the doll's expression change, and even witnessing it move on its own. Furthermore, the Ottos would wake up in the middle of the night to Gene screaming, only to find the frightened boy in bed, surrounded by overturned furniture. Gene would blame Robert the doll for messing up his bedroom. And no one knows if any of these stories are true.
I was going to say, so in that story, Jean is saying Robert the doll physically flipped everything over?
Yes. Yes. And he would be sitting. One of the stories I heard from another, I don't remember if it was a podcast or a TV show, they said that there's actual people who have told the story that one night Jean was screaming and the mom went running to his room and she couldn't get in the door. The door was somehow barricaded and she kept trying to open the door, open the door, open the door. And when she finally wrestled the door open, Jean was sitting in the corner of his bed, all scrunched up, and everything in his room was flipped over, destroyed. And like the sheets were off the bed, the pillows were all off bed, furniture was overturned, clothes and toys were everywhere. And Jean was huddled in the corner crying, and Robert the doll was sitting on the end of the bed. Now, how anyone knows that story, I don't know. It's become more generic to the story I told, like where they would hear Jean screaming, they would run to his room and things would be flipped around and stuff. But people have told very specific things that happened, and that every time something like that happened, Jean would blame Robert the doll. He would say, Robert did it, Robert did it, Robert did it. Jean's father died when he was only 17. And Dr. Otto, his dad was Dr. Otto. His death marked a significant shift for Jean. As a young man, losing a parental figure can create an emotional turmoil, leaving a void that some might seek to fill with objects or coping mechanisms. But now he's had the doll since he was like, I think they said 6, either 6 or 9. His dad died when he was 17. It's easy to speculate that Robert the doll, already a strange and constant presence in Jean's life, became more than just a childhood toy during this time. But he was 17. Was he so attached to his doll that it became a comfort for him when his dad passed away?
I mean, I guess that's plausible, but seems not normal.
It says, as Jean processed the loss of his father, his bond with Robert may have become more of a source of comfort, albeit an unsettling one. Reports from the Otto household during this time suggest that Jean's behavior grew more erratic. He would spend hours in his room talking to Robert, often speaking in 2 different voices, his own and one that his parents and staff described as eerie and otherworldly. So people would actually hear 2 voices coming from his room. Was it Jean making 2 voices? Or was his doll talking back? What had once seemed like an innocent child's attachment to a beloved toy now started to look like something far more disturbing. Jean's deepening attachment to Robert after his father's death coincided with the increase in strange occurrences around the Otto home. This period marked the escalation of paranormal activity, with family members and servants reporting more frequent and violent disturbances. Furniture thrown around the house, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and Robert seemingly moving on its own. It's tempting to consider that Jean in his grief might have unknowingly transferred some of his emotional turmoil onto Robert, feeding whatever energy the doll seemed to possess, which they've already determined was dark. Jean's father had been a strong and authoritative figure in his life, and with him gone, Jean may have felt lost and overwhelmed by the expectations placed on him. Without the grounding presence of his father, Jean might have turned to Robert for reassurance. It's not uncommon for people, especially those who are grieving, to form attachments to objects that remind them of a time when they felt safe or protected. Robert could have become a symbol of stability, a figure that Jean believed would always be there for him. However, this attachment to Robert wasn't entirely benign. As Jean aged, his relationship with Robert grew increasingly bizarre. He seemed to regard Robert less as a doll and more of a companion, someone or something that exerted influence over him. Those around Jean began to fear that Robert's presence was more than psychological. It was as if the doll had its own intentions, often expressed through Jean's actions or words. Jean's fixation on Robert, coupled with the loss of his father, may have allowed the doll or entity attached to it to gain a stronger foothold in Jean's life. It's worth considering the emotional vulnerability Jean experienced after his father's death made him more defenseless to whatever supernatural force was at work within Robert. Grief has long been associated with heightened emotional energy, and in the paranormal world, it's believed that spirits or malevolent entities can latch onto such emotions, feeding off energy and manifesting in increasingly disturbing ways. In Jean's case, Robert could have become a vessel for the dark energy, with the doll channeling the grief, pain, and loss that Jean carried after his father's death. Jean's tendency to talk to Robert, sometimes for hours, might have been a coping mechanism for his unresolved emotions, but it also could have been the moment when the line between Jean's psychological state and the supernatural blurred. In this way, Robert became not just a symbol of comfort, but the embodiment of Jean's unresolved grief, and a reminder of the darker forces that seemed to surround him. Perhaps Robert represented the part of Jean that couldn't process his father's death, a part of him that sought control and understanding, but found neither in the chaotic emotions of loss. After Jean moved away to college and served in World War II and married, He kept Robert with him, a testament to the powerful and unsettling bond the two shared. Now, this is what I'm confused about. Some stories say that he left Robert at his mom's house. Other stories say he took it with them. For the sake of the most common told story, I'm sticking to this one. By the time that Gene returned to Key West and inherited his childhood home, Robert was no longer just a doll from his past. He had become a part of Gene's life, continuing to hold sway over him even as an adult. Gene married Annette Parker in Paris in 1930. By 1950, Anne, as she was referred to, and Gene were back living in the childhood home with Robert the doll. Anne was reportedly uneasy about Robert, feeling a malevolent presence associated with the doll. She tried to lock Robert in the attic, but Gene would always find the doll and return it to its special room, a room that Gene had decided would be Robert's room.
I think it is creepy, but I don't think it's abnormal to what he's clearly been doing forever.
Yeah, but there was a point where she married him and lived in Paris and New York, and then they come home and the doll has to be in a specific room. Like, you just got married. Does he have any, like, weird attachments to things that have to be in a certain place?
No. Besides having to buy new shoes all the time. Because they get slightly dirty. But no.
But other than that,
there's no doll in my house.
There's no doll. I know, it's that, I can see where she wouldn't like it. But she felt that it had a negative spirit attached to it. That's how she felt. Visitors to the house reported strange occurrences involving Robert. They claimed to hear footsteps upstairs and laughter that wasn't Gene's or any other person living in the home. Neighbors reported seeing Robert move from window to window when the family wasn't home, and children reported seeing Robert watching them from the window in the upstairs bedroom. Some told accounts of the doll actually mocking them as they walked to school. In Gene's later years, and this is where it gets a little creepy. I mean, it's kind of creepy already, but this is where it gets really creepy. In Gene's later years, he was said to have set up a studio for his art in the turret room and moved Robert up there with him, supposedly at Robert's insistence. Gene would say that Robert wanted a view of the street. He even built Robert little furniture, and his wife Anne often heard Gene and someone having conversations while he was up there working when no one else was in the house. Some say he even started sleeping in the studio so he wouldn't leave Robert alone. Now, this is a grown-ass married man playing with a doll. Now, this gets, you know what I mean? That's where, and they say like he got really sick and he wouldn't leave the attic. He would sleep in a bed in the attic with Robert, not his wife, with his doll. After Gene's death in 1974, Anne moved away and left Robert in the attic, supposedly with a note that the cedar chest and the doll in it was never to be moved. The house was sold to a new family who also experienced eerie events. The new owner's daughter found Robert in the attic and was delighted by the doll until she started having nightmares. She claimed that Robert was trying to kill her, and her parents also reported unsettling events similar to those experienced by the Ottos. In 1994, Robert the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, where he remains today. Prior to that, the next owners of the Otto home donated it to the Historical Society after keeping it with them for 20 years. She claimed that he moved around her house on its own. Visitors and staff at the museum continue to report strange occurrences. Robert is kept in a plexiglass case, and those who fail to follow the 3 rules I mentioned at the beginning are often report misfortunes such as car accidents, broken bones, job loss, relationship breakups. The museum receives letters and emails from people apologizing to Robert and asking for his forgiveness. Of people saying, "Please, Robert, can you forgive me so that my car starts running again?"
Yeah, that's crazy.
Would you do that if you went there? And
I don't know. I don't know that it's real, so I don't know that I care.
Tens of thousands of people that would disagree.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
With you. The museum staff report that Robert's facial expression changes, and he's sometimes found in different positions than he was left in. Electronic devices near Robert are known to malfunction, and unexplainable cold spots are often felt in his vicinity. The museum has over 10,000 letters from people from all over the world asking Robert for forgiveness for not asking prior for taking his picture or disrespecting him while in his presence by making fun of the rules or Robert himself. And then I found some stories. I went to Reddit and I found some stories of people who wholeheartedly believe in the powers of Robert. I'm just going to tell you some of the stories. A person I know went to see Robert when they were on vacation and followed all the rules that was placed when you go into his area. When her and her son left the room, another family came into Robert's area, loud, and was busy taunting Robert, disobeying the rules that were set. They watched from a distance, and when they were about to turn around to go to another part of the museum, all of a sudden they heard the mom in the group scream, and then a child crying, and then the group were tripping over each other to get out of the room. Obviously, they had met Robert's rage. She decided to go back after the group left, and she talked to Robert like a child, told him that she said she was sorry for the family that was being cruel to him since they were saying horrendous things, and that people react that way to something they don't understand. After she was done speaking to him, before they left the area, a music box started to play. They stood to listen for 3 to 4 minutes before it stopped, and she thanked him. When she commented on the music in Robert's room, an employee told her that sound system in Robert's room hasn't worked in years. The only time it plays now is when Robert is happy. It's been a long time since Robert has played it. You must have had an effect on him. Her husband didn't believe her and asked to see the sound system. The employee showed him, and sure enough, it was covered in dust and hadn't been touched or fit. Another story is my brother and my sister-in-law and I went to Key West in 2021. We saw Robert, and while I was tempted to take a picture, I did not. My brother thought the whole thing was silly, like Haley. And while my sister-in-law and myself were respectful to Robert, my brother was making little jokes. I scolded him, and he piped down. When you leave Robert's exhibit, you're supposed to thank him. I thanked him, my sister-in-law thanked him, and so did my brother by saying, "Thank you, Robert," in a sarcastic tone. Immediately after leaving the museum, we went to the beach. My sister-in-law got a phone call saying that the plumbing for the rental property backed up. When I came back from the trip, I found out that my job was shutting down that week. 6 months later, my brother and sister-in-law were divorced. And they're blaming Robert. Poor Robert. My dad, doing the typical dad stuff, was joking around and not taking Robert seriously, taking his picture without permission and stuff like that. A couple of days later, we were set to fly back home, and there was a major mix-up at the airport. The staff had given us completely wrong information about where we were supposed to go for checking our bags and going through security. That caused us to miss our flight. My dad spent hours on the phone trying to sort it out, and best he could do is get us on a plane to New Jersey, spend the night there, and then fly home the next day. He wrote an apology letter to Robert upon arriving home. I mean,
travel stuff like that happens constantly to everyone every single day.
I know.
Flying is like the worst thing to do ever.
I mean, 2021, there's probably all kinds of flight issues. Just like a couple weeks ago, everybody's flight was being canceled. Your cousin's boyfriend just a couple weekends ago got 2 of his flights canceled. Robert's legend grew after he moved to the East Martello Museum in 1994, with countless stories of visitors being affected by the doll's presence. Here's a deeper dive into this chilling account. A couple visiting the museum on their honeymoon reported that after taking a picture without Robert's permission, their rental car refused to start, even though it had been working perfectly earlier in the day. They ended up being stranded in the museum parking lot for hours. When they finally sent an apology email to the museum asking for Robert's forgiveness, their car miraculously started with no issues. A professional photographer who was skeptical of the doll's powers decided to test the limits. He took multiple photos of Robert without asking permission. Not only did the photographs come out distorted, but the expensive camera he used malfunctioned permanently afterward. The photographer later returned to the museum to apologize and left a new camera as an offering. A Key West resident who visited Robert as part of a school field trip when he was a child recalled feeling cold and nauseous the moment he entered the doll's room. Despite following all the rules, his family experienced a series of financial setbacks soon after the visit. He believes it was linked to an offhand joke he made about Robert during the trip. One of the more famous modern-day encounters with Robert the doll involved none other than, and I love this, Ozzy Osbourne. Known for his eccentric behavior, obviously, and his brushes with the macabre, Ozzy has had his share of strange experiences. But Robert left an impression on the Prince of Darkness that he may never forget. Ozzy's connection to Robert stems from an episode on his reality show, Ozzy and Jack's World Tour. Did you ever watch that one?
Is that the newer one?
They
had an older show, like a family show.
And we watched the one that was paranormal, right? Like he would show them videos or something.
No, I don't remember that. I remember watching them like as a family, like a reality show from probably like the early 2000s.
Well, Jack,
that's all I remember.
But you do know Jack is very much into the occult and paranormal.
Oh, yeah, I do know. Yeah.
Ozzy's connection to Robert stems from an episode of the reality show Ozzy and Jack's World Tour, where he and his son Jack Osbourne traveled to Key West. While Jack, a paranormal enthusiast, had long been fascinated with the story of Robert the doll, Ozzy was more skeptical about haunted dolls and paranormal phenomena in general. That skepticism, however, soon was tested. During the visit to Key West, Jack decided to bring Ozzy a replica of Robert the doll as a gift. While the replica wasn't the original Robert housed in the Fort East Martello Museum, it still bore the same eerie likeness that has been unsettling for so many over the years. Initially, Ozzy laughed about it and even poked fun at the situation, holding the doll, mocking its creepy appearance on camera. However, the encounter took a darker turn when Ozzy later claimed that the replica had brought him a string of bad luck. After bringing it home, Ozzy reportedly began experiencing a series of misfortunes that he couldn't quite explain. While he's no stranger to chaos and accidents, the timing of the events left him wondering if the doll had something to do with it. Some sources closest to Ozzy even mentioned that he was convinced the doll had cursed him in some way, much like the countless visitors who faced Robert's wrath for not showing proper respect. In his typically candid and humorous style, Ozzy later commented that the bad luck he experienced might have been linked to disrespecting Robert's likeness. He admitted that he should have been more cautious, and Jack later revealed that his father felt genuine unease about the whole incident. Ozzy's experience with Robert, albeit through a replica, is a reminder that even a skeptic like him can be unnerved by the doll's reputation. Whether it was a coincidence or something more, the string of mishaps Ozzy faced after his encounter with the replica left him with a newfound respect for the legend of Robert the Doll. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne was a badass. He bit the heads off bats and chickens and stuff. He was scared of a doll. Maybe he'll call us and tell us his side of the story. We should reach out to Jack because Jack's all about the paranormal. So in conclusion, we said we introduced ourselves to Robert and now we are saying goodbye to Robert. So we're following all the rules. You want to add anything? Are you going to still be skeptical or?
No. I mean, thanks, Robert, for the story.
There we go. See, we've done it all respectfully. Robert the Doll's Tale is one of the most famous haunted doll stories in the world. The combination of documented accounts with multiple generations, the ongoing reports of paranormal activity, and the eerie history make Robert a compelling and chilling figure. Today, Robert continues to intrigue and terrify those who encounter him, keeping the legend alive, and you can meet him yourself at the East Martello Museum in Florida. But be careful, there are those who say he's looking at you while you're looking at him. Thank you for listening to this episode of Haunting History Podcast. We love hearing from you, so be sure to like, follow, and comment on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to all your favorites.
Visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com for more information on each episode, links to our Patreon page, and all of our social media platforms.
Until next time, I'm Kat.
I'm Haley.
Remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.
A touch of formaldehyde, a pinch of acetaldehyde, a splash of acrolein makes the perfectly evil vape cloud.
Vaping can expose you to a toxic mix of chemicals. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.